Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on digital transformations in aerospace. My name is Jack Cooler, and I'm the research director at Payload. We have a couple great guests today and a fairly large panel, so I will let them introduce themselves in a second. But before we get started, we do have a Q&A box that we'd love for the audience. If you have a question, just plop it in the Q&A box, and we will certainly get to it. And a quick shout out to our sponsor here, Epsilon3 is sponsoring this webinar. And we have Laura and Trish who will introduce themselves as well here with us. But with that, we'd love to kind of welcome everyone to the panel. We'd love to get introductions on all of you. Maybe kind of a 30-second background on who you are, what your experience is, and the organization you work for. And Ryan, I think we can start with you.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me here today. I appreciate it. My name is Ryan White. I'm the Director for Software and Digital Design at Kepler Communications. We develop CubeSats and microsats for low Earth orbit, and our mission is to bring the internet to space. I've been there for about 2 years, and prior to that, I was mostly aerospace and military defense.
Great. Kevin?
Hey everyone, great to be here. My name is Kevin Lapp. I'm the Engineering Division Manager at Firehawk Aerospace. We're here in Dallas, Texas, and focus mainly on hybrid rocket engines. Been with the company for about 3.5 years, just getting it across the board, startup, getting it going, and overseeing the engineering. Before that, I was with Virgin Orbit for about 3 years doing engine testing in California.
Thank you. Laura?
Yeah, I'm with Epsilon3, and I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders here. We are helping drive successful missions by building software platforms. So a good topic for us, helping customers around the space industry with integration, tests, and operations, and help them move faster with smaller teams. My background is in aerospace and astronautics. So I spent 5 years at Northrop and 11 years at SpaceX running testing and operations and training for both of those companies. So thanks for having me here.
Thank you. And Trish?
Hey, I'm Trish. I'm a customer success manager here at Epsilon3. So as Laura mentioned, complex procedural softwares, primarily for aerospace, but a few other industries as well. Essentially, my day-to-day is going through the different implementation and adoption with customers, making sure that once they do purchase Epsilon3, that they are able to work it into their workflows in a seamless manner and that everything is going well. Primarily, my background is actually not in aerospace. It's more in the SaaS industry in general. So definitely happy to be here. Great.
Thank you. So again, today's webinar is on digital transformation in aerospace, and would love to just frame that conversation. Maybe Laura, I'll kick this one to you first, but to frame the conversation on, you've been in the industry, it sounds like 15 years. What has changed over the last 15 years? What were you seeing even 5 years ago, 5, 10, 15 years ago? And what are the needs and what does the landscape look like in the digital transformation world today?
Yeah, so when I started in the industry, which was almost 20 years ago now, which seems like a very long time ago, we were running all of our testing and operations with MATLAB for processing and plotting, and all the digital tools that we had for modeling and simulation. And then we had, Word and Excel, and that was pretty much it. So we would print out papers, and I had many a folder and binder next to me in operations and in testing, and clipboards and red pens and blue pens and all those such things. And so I think over the last 20 years, we've seen the industry not only grow in capability, but grow in needs. So, every industry across the world has gone through some type of digital transformation or another. And I think the space industry, we're seeing that in the last couple of years. And so Epsilon3 was born out of sort of past pain and past things that I had experienced. And we were really excited to be part of it.
Great. And Ryan, what's your experience on the changing digital landscape over the last 10 years, and maybe speak on how your company is digitizing workflows?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, our major focus when bringing the internet to space has been to leverage the technologies and capabilities of your terrestrial-based networks and digital infrastructure and extend that to low Earth orbit. And as such, some of the innovative technologies that we put in place, allow us to connect with satellites on orbit and our operations center almost in near real time. And we're able to collect analytics. We're able to make decisions. Work towards automating workflows and reducing the amount of manual operations required to manage our constellation. So, yeah, one of the biggest changes I think I've seen is just having that extension of a network infrastructure on orbit has made it very easily for us to remotely manage and control our products and services.
And what were your tools before? Were you just sheets and?
Yeah, very, 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 very manual, as Laura had indicated there. And I think the Epsilon3 product is something that even as we continue to automate and build out our operations and services would be a great addition to the toolbox of what we have to keep streamlining and lowering the cost of effort and energy to get into our LEO industry.
Great. And Ryan, we have a question in the question box on what company you work for.
Kepler Communications.
Kepler Communications. And can you give another one sentence on what they do?
Yeah, Kepler's primary mission is to bring the internet to space. The way we want to do that is with constellations, so rings of satellites in LEO low Earth orbit that are interconnected optically. And then at any point, those satellites within that optical ring will always have a connection to a ground station, allowing customer satellites to connect to that network and providing them near real-time access to their payloads and their satellites on orbit, which is traditionally a very difficult problem to solve. Right now, you've got satellites that orbit the Earth, and once roughly every 90 minutes, you can see them for a very short period of time, and then they go away. And Kepler's mission is to make that seamless and near real time.
Yeah, and a lot the crux of that, or a lot of the secret sauces in the optical communication, the optical interlinks between satellites.
That's correct.
Interesting. Great. And Kevin, I'd love kind of your answer on this too, and how your workflow is digitized, and maybe kind of a before and after. What was it like 5-10 years ago, and what has the difference been, and how has that helped your workflow?
Yeah, so we started using Epsilon3 about 2 years ago. Before that, it was just, especially with our test operations, it was going through an Excel file line by line. Epsilon3 has been able to just greatly expand our capabilities when it comes to who can sign off on different things, or also not needing to scan things in at the end of a test day. There's so many different kind of one-off items we'll do if it's working on the test stand, and in the end you want all that data, as well as you want it to be not a hassle to losing files, or need to scan things in at the end of the day. So it's really kind of sped up our process when it comes to the documentation and making sure that we have everything in order for either testing or working on our different stands.
Great, thank you. And Trish, I see we have another question in the chat. This might be a good one for you to answer. Just kind of another brief overview of what Epsilon3 does, and kind of how you're kind of leading this digital transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Epsilon3 at its core is basically complex procedural software. So you can think of it from checklists to data input, telemetry and commanding. Tons of different capabilities there, but again, our core product is that procedural basis from integration, testing, and operations. In the last year or so, though, we have been developing additional modules, so additional capabilities essentially for folks that may not already have solutions in place for manufacturing, planning, and scheduling, like Gantt charts for the different operations, data analysis, etc. So we're covering a few different bases, but again, at the core, making sure that folks are getting through their tests in a really collaborative way.
So I want to jump into one of the biggest topics right now, and that's around cybersecurity regulations. And the way I want to get into this topic is through the even more buzzier conversation of AI and LLMs. And we see that. I've talked with many aerospace engineers, and there seems to be a lot of pros and cons of using AI, particularly LLMs, and particularly like kind of an open AI. And there's a difference, and I'd like for you guys to kind of explain that difference as well. But Trish, are you guys incorporating AI and particularly LLMs into the Epsilon3 product?
Yes and no. So we definitely are looking into it, and it's on our roadmap. But we realize it's a very, very kind of sensitive topic, making sure that not only is it completely reliable, especially for the very important tests that our customers are doing, but also that it does meet all those different security standards as well. So we are looking at some different features, but again, being very conscientious in how we develop them.
Yeah, I think I would add to that too, is that, we found that AI is very attractive. There's many use cases even in our industry and what we're producing. It's on our roadmap. It's something we want to go with a hybrid strategy. So one thing we've done is we've made sure that our satellites are outfitted with the capability to be able to run AI on board. So as we're building them up, we know that there will be a future there. We haven't deployed anything yet, but then we extend that hybrid architecture right down to the ground so that we can automate satellite operations, reducing again the workload on the number of operators physically required on console, so smarter decisions can be made. And then right down to LLMs within the organization being able to go through all of the data, all of the knowledge base, and be able to make smart decisions and analyze kind of where we are with our designs and our roadmaps. So it's a very enticing area to be looking into.
Yeah, there's a lot, like Ryan said, there's a lot to be unpacked there. And I think from our perspective, what are the most important things our customers want to be able to do with AI and LLMs? And so we have some capabilities that we are looking into on our test environment to be able to roll out, but it would be kind of on a per customer basis, based on the needs of that customer. Things like predictive analysis. If you're gathering data and storing data in Epsilon3, do you want to be able to look ahead and predict what might happen based on what has happened in the past? And in addition, if you're always creating procedures the same way, do you want to be able to just click a button and say, write me a procedure that does this based on all the things I've done before? There's a lot of potential there, but not everything is going to be wanted by every customer. So we'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah. And what's the biggest concern with it? Is it the general LLM hallucination? Is it the ITAR rules? Is it like keeping data secure?
I think most of the customers that I've talked to, the biggest concern is, will my data be shared with other people? And we want to make sure that the answer to that is no. So your data is your data and no one else's. And, there's definitely people out there that would say, let's share all the data with everyone, but knowing the environment and the customers and the people in this business, that's not something that, we're going to be able to do or want.
I echo Laura's comment there. The sensitivity of the data we develop, is it, how can we protect it? How can we ensure it's ours? Not being used for retraining or accessible as well. Anything that we generate out of those AI models, how can we gain confidence that it in itself is something that's licensed for us to use? It's not copyrighted. We don't run into any regulatory or licensing or ITAR issues that you mentioned earlier. So it's a real challenge.
Kevin, do you see that as well, or do you more see it as like a potential to? I think AI and LLMs could reduce the amount of hours you put into a specific project, but you have to weigh these other concerns. And Kevin, how do you see it as, do you see it as something that you want to implement in your workflow to reduce hours, or is the kind of risk right now too big to take?
I would say definitely down the road. It's not something I've put a ton of thought to in the past with what we're currently doing. But some of the items that Laura brought up would be quite nice. And sorry. That being said, some of the items that Laura brought up that would be quite nice. But kind of to Ryan's point, I'm curious how if a software that you're using is creating stuff for your company, but that software is for a different company, how does that kind of play in?
Yeah.
So that
It's a
is
great
what-
question. That's one of the probably within the top 10 questions that we've got itself. The other one being we've also looked at using AI for verification. So you talked specifically around software. There's quite a bit of software developed for our platforms, similar to you, Kevin. So can we generate code to speed up our ability to go to market and product quicker? And can we use that for testing and being able to come test cases and find holes and issues within our designs? All would be incredible competitive advantages to have in our industry. But the licensing and data security issue is definitely top of mind.
So that in that scenario, it would act more as like a fact checker rather than you having to rely on it to produce the data and be certain that data is right. It's kind of an interesting way of utilizing AI more as a something that you don't have to rely on, but an added benefit to help you as an assistant almost.
Exactly. So we hear the popular products out there like Copilot and others that are designed to be an aid or to help you along, but you as a designer still has to check that what you're doing and what you're releasing is sound and makes sense.
Yeah. And Ryan, I want to touch on something that you brought up at the beginning of this conversation, which was including AI. It seems like it's almost like edge computing and digitization on orbit within a satellite. And to me, when I think of kind of AI on a satellite, I think of like you would need massive computing power and it would impact swap constraints. And how are you looking at that in terms of, like mass on board to do that?
It's a great question. So we early on had this idea that being able to put IoT or edge type processing on our satellites will probably one day have its benefit. What we can do with it right at this moment, it's not quite clear, but we had a vision and still have this vision that we'll be able to leverage things like AI on board. And you're right, it does take massive processing capabilities, but we factor that in at an early stage and we continue to deploy into our satellites. So our hope there is that we can actually put AI on board to help with FDIR or anomaly detection. And as I mentioned earlier, we leverage a lot of terrestrial network technologies and extend that to our satellites. So one of the things that's key is optimizing network traffic and routing. So there might be the possibility that you can use AI to optimize this constantly connected moving network ring orbiting the Earth to figure out what is the most efficient way to get data back down to the ground.
Great, thank you. With AI, we talk about kind of the headwinds, the regulatory headwinds, but I do think with digitization and software products, there's a lot of benefits, and probably that's one of the biggest benefits. Laura, you can correct me, maybe take this question too, but it probably does in terms of regulation. There must be a lot of benefits with incorporating kind of a digitized workflow model.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of people that we work with are needing to get AS 9100 certification and ISO 9001. So there's a lot with actually writing things down and having traceability and having who did what, when, where, and why, and what decisions were made. All kind of digitized makes that process really easy. So a lot of the regulations that our customers need. And then when it comes to regulatory bodies like the FAA, or if you're working with NASA, they want oversight on a lot of the things that you do, especially in operations. And so, a lot of our customers are also giving their regulatory oversight committee access to view or look at what they're doing and the decisions that they've made during operations. So makes that kind of communication and coordination a lot easier as well.
We have another question in the chat. Trish, maybe this one can be for you. It's about who would be likely champion to support SaaS or AI projects. I assume this is referring to like who would be the buyer, maybe, or someone who's really pushing for it. Would be the CFO or engineer. Who are the customers that you talk to, Trish, in the aerospace world?
Honestly, with that, specifically around the AI projects, I would say that kind of mirroring like even what, Kevin was mentioning, I mean, personally, I speak most often with our actual users, the folks that are on the ground using the software. And so a lot of the interest is coming from how to make their day-to-day a little bit faster, a little bit easier on top of what like softwares like Epsilon3 already do. So in terms of the champions, I would say the users, and then, kind of going up the chain to the folks that are actually, a little bit more in charge of financials that actually would see the benefit of that. But hoping that I interpreted that question correctly.
Yeah. And I guess so, like Kevin, you are a user of Epsilon3?
I would say I'm a viewer. I will
You're a
watch as the ConOps go off and the testing. But I mean, have many times in the platform had my my monthly meeting with my rep, and but my team are the main users. That being said, something that Laura brought up, the customer interface has been great, where we have many times requested certain items to be kind of brought to the forefront, and then the developers there will kind of tailor it to what we need, which has been great.
Yeah. So when you're when you look at Epsilon3, is it, or when you look at any software project and the digitization of workflows, is it the primary support being a time? Is it just a reduced man hours time used on a project? Is it to make sure you're getting data right and information right? So kind of almost like you increase the safety of a mission in a way. Or is it just like a monetary thing where it's just increasing efficiency? What's the biggest benefit of digitizing your workflow?
Let's see. I would say the traceability is a big part, and then the traceability, and then also kind of the user interface. At a previous company, we had way too many softwares doing similar stuff. So trying to get a package that can do a plethora of items is also very key in my mind. We started using the software mainly just for testing, but now we are using it for more like integration, or kind of like I mentioned, the one-off items when it comes to working on the test stand. So those are more the things I think of when it comes to bringing different softwares on board, is what all items can it do for us kind of across the board versus having one-off things for certain projects.
Yeah, and Kevin, I think kind of, hopping onto that, something I hear from a lot of the folks I talk to as well, seems like there's a lot of tool fatigue, not only in this industry, but pretty much everywhere. It's how can you kind of minimize the amount of tools that you are using on a day-to-day basis. And I know that's been really, really key for us, is making sure that, as mentioned, we have all these different capabilities. That's great if you don't already have a solution. But as you just said, integration is huge. So how can we integrate with the other processes you already have kind of in your tool or on your tool belt, to make sure that, either there's a source of truth or everything's at least communicating to each other, and you're not kind of having to go between multiple tabs, multiple softwares, and getting lost and probably a little frustrated in the process as well.
I think that's a key statement that Trish just made too, is that regardless if it's within Epsilon or, any other type of software tool, one of the things I think we're seeing in the digital transformation is this ability to seamlessly integrate between one step to the next step, to some execution to feedback. Being in that digital world, you can really put some time, and AI aside, you can automate a lot of this by writing interfaces and integrations between them. And I think that's been one of the most powerful things I've seen probably in the last 10-15 years.
I totally agree with that. I had built some internal tools in my previous lives, and this was 2009 or 2010-ish timeframe. And they were never connected to anything else. So we didn't connect to command and telemetry. We didn't connect to a parts database. We didn't connect to issues. We'd have to, if we found an issue, we'd have to make a JIRA ticket. And then someone would have to track that JIRA ticket back to, where we had a problem in ops, or if I had a problem with flight software during an operation, I'd have to make a ticket somewhere else. And so, like Ryan said, this seamless connectivity between different tools is, paramount to success across the industry, I think.
And even from a traceability perspective, I'm even seeing, and great example, Laura, is that when we have an anomaly that we detect, we not only can generate tickets internally, but because of the digitization we can connect that right down to the lines of code that we implement that fix that problem or address that issue. And if needed, we can report on that, and we can show this was the issue found. Here was the resolution, the root cause, and it's been since closed and released on the next update of some software or some release.
Laura, I know there was a question in the chat too about cloud-based software versus on-premises software.
I've been trying to, in between, answer the questions in the chat. So, we wanted to be cloud first, but always planned to have the abilities for on-premise deployments. I previously worked in a SCIF, actually multiple different SCIFs, but that was my previous job, my past life, and so I know how more secure environments work, and I know that more secure environments aren't going to necessarily be okay with a cloud-hosted environment. And so we had built our software from the ground up to be able to be deployed. And we started supporting on-prem deployments about 1.5 years ago. So we've got multiple customers doing on-prem deployments for that exact reason, in closed areas or more secure environments that where they don't want cloud-hosted. We also do support some hybrid deployments. So if you want cloud and on-premise for reliability, although we do offer really high reliability, there are some people who don't necessarily always trust the cloud environments, especially when it's managed by someone else. So I have to say that very lightly. And
what generally characterizes a higher secured customer? And what I'm trying to get to with that question is that we have Firehawk and Kepler are more of in the startup bucket. Do you see a difference in appetite to integrate software products for more of legacy aerospace businesses or more of defense based businesses?
So if you're operating in a confidential, secret, or top secret environment, you're not likely to be able to do an AWS cloud-hosted environment. We are in GovCloud because it's ITAR secure, and so it is approved for customers in the space field, but without having access to more secure environments, you want to be behind a firewall. You want to be where someone is air-gapped. You're going to have an on-prem deployment.
Yeah, and to reinforce what Laura's saying there, Kepler we have direct experience right now with customers on the US side where we've got to deploy to AWS, Gov Cloud, because of their needs, where we can service the rest of our customers. When we're moving data from space to ground, we can go directly into cloud services, which gives customers, their own dedicated connection to their data. Kepler doesn't see it. We're transporting it. But the need for security is definitely there, depending on those agencies and governments you're working with. So, it's a challenge sometimes.
Yeah. And how about with Trish? How about with just non-defense customers? Do you see more of an appetite in general with startups versus maybe legacy aerospace or traditional aerospace, or does everyone see the need in this?
Honestly, with that, I would say it's pretty across the board. I would say, the primary difference I've noticed when working with, because I work with some of the more traditional companies as well as some very, very new ones. Of course, if there's somebody that's potentially been working at one of these companies for 30 years and is very, very set in their ways, it might take a little bit of extra, proof in the pudding to make them a believer in going digital. But I would say that by and large, it's pretty successful. A lot of the benefits are undeniable, especially if some of the other teammates have started utilizing it and they are kind of already really seeing those benefits, whether it be in time savings, reduced errors, etc. So I'd say that the appetite is there all around, but some of the more traditional or legacy companies might just take a little bit of extra convincing because it's going to be, of course, a much larger overhaul as well.
Yeah, people will say things like, "We got to the moon without calculators and with a chalkboard and a slide rule." But if they'd had capabilities like this, they probably would have used it.
There's another question in the chat about what industry sectors does Epsilon3 cover?
Oh, that's a good question. We can cover pretty much all complex engineering. So we've been working with aviation, eVTOL customers, fusion and energy, as well as space across space. So launch, satellite operations, engine testing, robotics, and private space stations. So there's lots of different use cases, and just a couple that we've talked about here. I would love to hear more about Ryan, what you guys are doing on the automation side of things, because
Sure.
we talk a lot about ground tools, and we talk a lot about automation and digitization, but it has to be in concert with what you're doing on the space side of things. And you mentioned a little bit about FITR earlier, fault detection. I don't know, colloquial call it FITR, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you guys are doing in that arena.
Yeah, great question. So with the IP-based internet to space that we've been building, we have also developed our constellation management system from the ground up. It was an investment into a very flexible, highly tuned, automated system that takes care of scheduling, operations, command and control of the spacecraft with very little operator oversight. And really, when it comes to the FDIR, the anomaly detection, we've got automated systems like leveraging things like, Ops Genie and other alerting systems that can tell us, hey, there's something outside the norm here that doesn't run within our standard procedures and we need attention. As a result, we are able to run our satellite operations team with a very low headcount. Because the system continues to manage and automate a lot of what we're doing. But we do continue to look to integrating to packages that can help with that further automation, whether that's AI, whether that's Epsilon3, whether or not that's other things that we need to develop that we can extend. And, based on the development we've done, we can extend a lot of that functionality or insight to our customers through various portals and platforms and dashboards where they can see the kind of the health and state of the network as we continue to build it out.
Does everyone in your on your operations team have to be on site, or can they be at home?
Great question. I would like to tell you that officially every one of our satellite operators is remote and not on site, because it's been built that way, and we leverage cloud technology and the ability to run with centralized systems, whether they're in co-location data centers or on-prem servers. We can access our entire constellation management system remotely.
Awesome. Sorry, I took over.
No, please. I'd love. Yeah, no, let's keep.
Actually, Laura, I'm going to turn the tables. I got a question for you. What I'd like to hear more about at Epsilon3 is you mentioned aviation, and I know this is a bit outside the space, but in the aviation world, I'm familiar with some pretty high standards, specifically like DO 178 or 254 DAL levels. Is that something that Epsilon is set up to help you manage and execute? When you got to go through testing, verification, traceability.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing, is helping our customers with traceability and setting up their testing and their test sequences, and making sure that once they have verified a test is complete, then they have traceability back to who completed it, where it was completed, and they can create a report from that.
Nice.
How does aviation differ from like the space world and space flight? Laura, maybe you can answer that one too.
Yeah, sure. So on the aviation side, like Ryan kind of mentioned, there's very stringent requirements with respect to managing and reporting on your testing. So you'll have a matrix of speeds, altitudes, different parameters that you want to test against, and you have to say, I did these 30 different tests at these 30 different altitudes at these varying speeds, and managing that full matrix of testing requirements and testing test cases. It's very cumbersome for most teams to do. And so leveraging what we've built for space on sort of the procedure and the complex checklist side of things, if you will. We integrate with data platform, and then we build the test matrix to help build a sequence, which looks very much like a procedure would in Epsilon3 from the beginning. And then you'll have full traceability of those tests that you've completed, and it looks more like a checklist, but it goes back into verifying that matrix is complete.
I'd like to say too, over the years, I've learned one big difference between space missions and aviation, where some of these standards come from, is that aviation usually involves humans. And when you've got people associated with some platform or engineering feat, they seem to want to tighten up the requirements on performance and reliability and quality. Space has got its own challenges for longevity and where you're going in this harsh environments, but aviation usually tries to take it from that angle.
And do you think in like the next 10, 15 years, as space and spaceflight grow, standards and the regulatory needs are going to increase?
Absolutely. One of the things that we're starting to see emerge at Kepler and our PD team has been focused on is human spaceflight. So that's becoming a big trend and a big innovation path forward, where humans will continue to venture out, and there is a lot of work going into it today just to try and plan for that future. 5-10 years from now, when more and more humans will be venturing beyond the borders of our own Earth.
Yeah. Kevin, does Firehawk's regulation fall within the space domain, or because it's rockets, or does it fall more within the aviation weapon DoD range?
More with the DoD range. Some of the things that were kind of brought up when it comes to the security and everything is, we will be getting there. We've talked to Epsilon3 about the on-prem, and we know the regulations are coming as we grow, as we get our name more out there and are doing work for the government. All those things are coming here soon, as well as for example, you're talking about like the kind of the run boxes for the aircraft. Rocket engines have that same kind of item, more along the lines of OF ratios, or high pressure, low pressure, high temp, low temp, kind of showcasing those run boxes that no matter where you're at in them, you are still have a healthy engine. So those items come into play for us when it comes to engine performance. And then other item I wanted to kind of touch on that Laura brought up was how kind of having that test matrix built into your ops. We are using that. Using that now, but to a much lesser scale. But it's been able to, we have people out in the field right now. They have, I think, 5 tests they're looking to get done these next 2 days, and that's all put into Epsilon3 and kind of, so right when you log in, you see what you're going to be doing that day, what your goals are for the day, and tracking all of it throughout.
Great. And I'd love to hear more about Firehawk and the rockets you're building, and what the applications are for.
Yeah, so our main bread and butter right now is hybrid rocket engines. We have a good amount of patents that protect how we 3D print the solid fuel for the hybrid. So our fuel is ABS plastic, the same thing that Legos is made out of, and our oxidizer of choice right now is nitrous oxide. The company overall has been mainly internal R&D for the last 2 to 3 years, but this year we have a contract with the Army to design, build, fly 3 different size propulsion systems, as well as we'll be doing some sounding rockets for the Air Force. That's all the hybrid items, and then we are, dipping our toes and hopefully moving quite quickly forward when it comes to printing solid propellant. We have a phase 1 AFWorks on printing solid propellant. So kind of multiple different areas of propulsion, but overall a propulsion provider.
Awesome. Cool. So you work closely with the U.S. Army, you said?
Yeah, we have the Army Advanced Project Lab out of Austin, Texas, working with them on a year-long contract.
And is there a lot of like cross collaboration, and how does kind of maybe Epsilon3 or different digital products enable that?
I mean, definitely, running the day-to-day with testing as well as, building the systems, frankly. So, with those projects mentioned, we will have work instructions for getting the system ready. All of those are in Epsilon3, getting the test stand ready for whether it's a static test or a launch. Those are all in Epsilon3 and will be a major part of our different contracts.
There's a question in the chat about regulatory. What happens about laws and regulation conflict? For instance, Ryan, you're in Canada. Are the US and Canadian regulations different, and how do you manage that?
Really good question. I'm going to say before I answer, I don't have all the answers. I'm not that deep into the regulatory, but I will say this from what I know. Yes, there's the difference. We're north of the border. That always presents a problem. Pardon me. It has in my entire career into the US side with ITAR related rules or other, security level clearances. The way we've managed to get around it as Kepler is that we do have a US entity that has been spun up, and they operate as our primary forefront for a lot of the government-based and US-based contracts that we've been seeking. So we're able to manage that by engaging that entity in the US.
Awesome.
And is the Epsilon3 platform, is that international beyond Canada, US?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got customers all over the world right now. So again, we've got pretty stringent regulations within our own platform. And for example, I get a lot of questions around, is data encrypted in transit? So we are just, very, very solid on encryption of data all around the process. So so far we haven't had any problems working with international customers.
So Trish, a question: when using Epsilon3, if you were going with a cloud base, do you have the capability to have data residency in different countries, both at rest and in transit?
We do. We have deployments in other countries as well. So we don't just have deployments in US. We have other deployments in other areas, so that the data doesn't just live in US servers.
Nice. We have about 15 minutes left in the webinar. If you guys have any questions, Q&A, put them in the chat. We'll try to get to them as many as we can. There's a good question for Kevin. Yeah.
Yeah. Users want to hear more about the test that you're running, and what is a static test?
Yeah, so great question. Tests can be, kind of looked at as system level or, the entire product together. So system level testing can be all the way just from doing a proof test to make sure your plumbing can hold pressure. Recently, we were working on our QD system, so taking our quick disconnects that feed the rocket or nitrous oxide, taking them to different temperatures, different pressures to make sure that they will disconnect when we want them to. And then your next big step after doing your system level testing will be a static hot fire. So that test is the engine sitting in place and turning on, making the very, very pretty flames. But making sure that it stays there. That is why it's static. The final then step is actually launching, where you have your flight vehicle on your launch platform, and that's the most exciting part of all. So from system level testing of individual components to testing the engine to testing the actual vehicle.
Everybody wants to see the fire.
Yeah, it's so true.
Kevin, it's you're using solid rocket fuel?
So with our hybrids, we use ABS plastic. It's a thermoplastic that we 3D print on our very large 3D printer here in Dallas.
Nice. This might be a very ignorant question, but how do you, when you light a solid rocket fuel, can't you not stop the process? So how do you static fire your engine without it just like continuing on?
So I would say we're starting to get in the solid world. We're mainly hybrids at this point. So with the hybrid, we do have a main aux valve where we can close that and the fire stops. But no, you're correct with solids. Is technology to do multiple burn solids, but when you light a solid, it's going. So
Yeah. Okay.
There's no stopping it. There's another question about Epsilon3's competitors, and I think for what makes this stand out is that we're really purpose built for integration, tests, and operations, with sort of a nod back to the build portion for traceability. Something that our customers really wanted us to do was to build back to parts and inventory so that they could test and build against them. Now, where the competition comes in more is on the manufacturing side of things, which is why we're not shutting the API down and saying you can't use other softwares. We know that many of our customers use other softwares for inventory. We want you to be able to do that as well as utilize Epsilon3. So there's not really a comparison on the operational side of the platform, but kind of on the manufacturing side, that's a very contested waters. So, we definitely don't want to shut people out from using other things as well.
And I think I saw from some literature I was reading on Epsilon3 that you do support quite a wide range of APIs and languages to interface with the tool, right? It's pretty flexible.
We have a pretty open API. It is published on the website. So we want to be part of the solution, especially when it comes to the digital age. We know that there's a lot of other softwares people can use out there, but we want to be part of what makes this industry faster and better and more reliable than it was 20 years ago. And we'll just continue to keep iterating on that.
That's great stuff.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes left, so just turning to the future, and kind of imagining what the next 10 years will look like, and how do you think this digital transformation is going to catalyze the next 10 years, and what do you think the next 10 years of aerospace, space, rocket engines is going to look like? Ryan, I could turn that over to you.
I think we're kind of seeing the emergence of some of that new space, and the next 10 years where we just continue to be able to put more and more assets into low Earth orbit with a lot of automation, a lot of digital capability and flexibility that will extend our ability to access data, process data, move data around globally and in space seamlessly and near real time. So where do I think it is in the next 10 years? I think in the next 10 years, you start to see, assets in space connected to the internet here on ground, and, as simple to access as, you do any other website, today. It's going to take a lot. And there's Kepler's very focused on this mission, and, there's other industries as well, and we're working closely with them. So I definitely think, with the tools that have been discussed here today, I think the level of automation will continue to help make us successful getting there.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of building on that, I think that with how things are becoming more digital, a lot of the folks that have been more hesitant to digitize different aspects of their workflows. Again, do I think that every single bit of somebody's day is going to be digitized? No, that's going to take a very, very long time. But I do think that there will be kind of like areas that are just like there's no hesitation, or there's really no way that people can kind of continue on with the hesitancy. Like, we're going to see people doing things faster. There's going to be a lot more competition. There's going to be more and more startups. So it's going to be kind of you want to keep up with the industry and not get left behind.
Yeah.
I just want to see a world in where the industry works together to solve problems and uses the information that we're gathering in the digital age to make the entire industry better, faster, and more reliable. That's not the place we're at today, but I think the more information we gather digitally, the better off we're going to be. And the data sharing probably will help us get there. So, envisioning a world in which there are no collisions in space. There are, multiple private space stations where people can go. There's communications, public and private, for space. There's PNT technology that is not just run by the government. There's a lot of advancements that I want to see, and a lot of them hinge on us being able to move as fast as possible. You're going to see more than one day a year, 2 launches in a day, like we did the other day. So you're going to see that more often, and I think we do need a lot more competition in all aspects of the space industry. So more launch vehicles, more satellites, more potential for success. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, Laura, it's amazing that even at SpaceX where you used to work and how well funded and seemingly a well-oiled machine it is, you seem to have seen something that could have been improved, and how even them can improve their digital efficiency and automation as well.
Yeah, there's always room for improvement, and I think if you sit back on your laurels and don't look at the industry and constantly want to improve, then we're doing something wrong here. So everyone here is looking at ways that they can improve their processes, they can improve their technology, hardware or software, they can improve their team, and I think we just have to look for all of those ways in which we can improve kind of every day.
Yeah. Ryan, I want to double click into your IoT comment about the world kind of moving to an IoT world, and how Kepler is going to help facilitate that and help facilitate the connectivity. And I'd love some specific examples, and this could be 5-10 years down the road, whether we're talking about an example could be a car is now an IoT device.
Yep.
But what do you see maybe beyond just a car? What do you see the IoT world going to with this ability to connect via space?
Great forward-looking question. So I think one of the things that's stuck out in my mind for a while now is, as we push the IoT or edge boundary to space, I mean, things like the Kepler network are designed to be, constantly connected and moving high amounts of data. You still have as the space industry grows over the next 10 to 15 years or so, the amount of data generated on orbit is going to continue to, eclipse our ability to be able to get it down to the ground. So one of the things that I would see emerging, and I think we're well positioned for, and working with others, is being able to deploy, smart solutions at the edge that will help with automatic control, queuing and tipping, or mission decisions actually happening out on the edges of space without having to come back down to your command and control and operation centers to make those decisions for you, and then relay that back up to your constellation or your spacecraft. So I think where I see a future is that we'll have more of the satellites and the machines kind of making those decisions automatically, performing their overall missions and objectives, and less of the need for operators to constantly be involved.
And why is that more efficient to have edge computing versus sending it up and down?
As I said, I think one of the big things you'll see is that you'll have large amounts of data that you need to move back and forth. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we're talking about Earth observation, and you're doing something, you're imaging some coastlines, and you need to try and determine if you can detect something of interest in that image. Right now, we're backhauling all of that data to ground. Maybe there's a future state where, instead you've got that image data being processed on the edge, making a decision about what it sees. Once, it's been able to detect clouds and look past that, and it finds something of interest, it can task another satellite somewhere else on orbit to say, hey, over your next pass, continue to take imagery. Now you're producing very useful real-time insight where the results of those may be brought down to the ground for further analysis by teams that are interested. But you didn't have to wait for all of that raw data to come back, process it on the ground, then make decisions to send commands back up to another spacecraft. You're kind of automating those operations on orbit. Again, I think that's 10, 15 years. There's a lot to get there, but I could definitely see a need for that. Just the amount of data, I think that'll be available.
Yeah, do you create a bottleneck by trying to downlink everything? And then I know I'm just peppering Ryan right now with questions. Excuse me, guys. Does anyone have any kind of last? I have one last question on this topic, but before that, anybody
Yeah.
have any comments or questions?
Yeah, to tag on to what both Ryan and Kevin are doing, in order for small teams to continue to move fast, you have to get people out of doing things manually. So it's one of the things you were talking about earlier is, when do you decide to make a task digital versus have a person do it? And the only way to make that decision is, do you have enough people? And do you want to continue to hire people to do those things manually? And for a 20, 50, even 200 person company, the answer is probably no. And for a lot of companies, that decision has to come at a breaking point. Is this a financially viable option? And if you have five people sitting in a control room all the time, that's a lot of money you're spending. So if you can, both what Kevin and what Ryan were saying is, if you digitize those things and then you have one person just monitoring what the spacecraft or what the stand is doing, it's going to be more efficient in the end.
Very, very true.
Great. I think that's actually a good place to leave it. Guys, Ryan, Trish, Kevin, and Laura, this has been awesome. I know there's one question that popped up in the chat, which I'll give you time to answer. But this has been awesome. Trish and Laura, do you mind giving your emails so that people can know if they want to contact you? And also Ryan and Kevin, maybe let's go around the horn and do that. Trish, you mind if you start?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just Trish at epsilon3.io.
Great. And Ryan?
It's rwhite@kepler.space.
Awesome. And Kevin?
Kevin at firehawkaerospace.com.
Awesome. And Laura, what's your contact?
Mine's just Laura, like what Trish said, at epsilon3.io. I also put it in the chat in a couple of questions. So if you reach out to any of us, thanks so much for listening. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.